And I just want to answer one more quick question. It's a follow-up. There is, I don't care if y'all hear it, there is definitively seasonal affective disorder. It is certainly true. And I was asked this twice, great question, that when there's less sun and there's more darkness, especially if you live in Minnesota, you're going to struggle with feelings that are different and your circadian rhythms and sleep. Here's a great stat for you. The average person today, we know this because of Apple Watches, sleeps about 6 hours and 10 minutes and has about 2.5 hours of deep sleep. The average human in 1950 slept on average 8 hours and had 4 hours of deep sleep. No wonder we're all anxious, tired, and can't get our weight under control. Joe, come talk to us about some happy stuff, shall you?
Oh, good times with John. Okay. Talked about what is it, what's it feel like, what are potentially some causes of it, looking at one of the most notable Psalms of Lament, Psalm 88. We're going to shift to another of the most notable Psalms of Lament, Psalm 42, to kind of, again, this is, no one is getting, quote, cured of deep soul-level issues in a couple of meetings, seminar meetings, okay? But I still want to try and give you some hooks to hang your hats on, things that we can just be actively doing with our depression or just our symptoms of depression. Again, whether or not it's a diagnosable disorder in our lives, okay? Both anxiety and depression, they are clinical diagnoses and they are words that we just use, in kind of common parlance to describe the ways that we're feeling. I'm kind of trying to talk about them in both, situations, okay? So I'll be pointing to this Psalm 42 throughout, so therefore let me go ahead and read it, and we'll dive in. Psalm 42. As a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night. While they say to me all the day long, where's your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God. For I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. My soul is cast down within me. Therefore I remember you from the land of Jordan and of Hermon, from Mount Mizar. Deep calls to deep at the roar of your waterfalls. All your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day the Lord commands a steadfast love, and at night his song is with me. A prayer to the God of my life. I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? As with a deadly wound in my bones, my adversaries taunt me, while they say to me all the day long, where is your God? Why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. Depression, like anxiety, has a double-edged sword to it. So anxiety's double-edged sword is that one can grow fearful of fear itself. Depression's double-edged sword is that depression affects us and it leads to lack of motivation, which can lead to a lack of motivation to get better. So David Foster Wallace writes in one of his essays, because the bad thing And when he says bad thing, he's referring to depression in this essay. Because the bad thing not only attacks you and makes you feel bad and puts you out of commission, it especially attacks and makes you feel bad and puts out of commission precisely those things that are necessary in order for you to fight the bad thing, to maybe get better, to stay alive. This is the way the bad thing works. It's especially good at attacking your defense mechanisms. The way to fight against it or get away from the bad thing is clearly just to think differently, to reason and argue with yourself, just to change the way you're perceiving and sensing and processing stuff. But you need your mind to do this. Your brain cells with their atoms and your mental powers and all that, yourself. And that's exactly what the bad thing has made too sick to work right. And so that's kind of the double-edged sword of somebody really dealing with this. So I lead with that to say, I don't want to set the bar too high, okay? Right? Because then it becomes even more overwhelming if you're somebody who is dealing with some depressive symptoms. But there are some things that I think we can begin to attempt, and that's what I want to highlight. We see them in Psalm 42. Here's the first thing. Do not neglect yourself. Do not neglect yourself. The Bible tells us we're sinful. The Bible tells us, yes, even your best deeds, they are worthless towards earning yourself any sort of salvation or earning yourself any sort of righteousness. But you are not worthless. And God does not care about your experience in this world. And so don't neglect yourself, because He doesn't neglect you. And He doesn't want you to just cast yourself aside. You know, some people, sometimes we can kind of think like, I'm more spiritual if I just kind of completely set myself aside. Don't neglect yourself. And I'll give you a couple of kind of categories to think in terms of this. First of all, don't neglect what's going on inside you. You know, and this has been a theme. You've kind of heard this in each of these talks so far. You got to take inventory. You got to do what these biblical writers do. You got to express to God, to others, what is it that's going on in there? My tears have been my food day and night. My soul's downcast. All your waves and breakers have swept over me. Why have you forgotten me, God? He's taken inventory. He's looked inside and He's put words to it. Okay, that's a part of naming this. That's a part of not neglecting your internal world. So how would you describe what's going on in you? Is it connected to circumstances, or is it not necessarily connected to something that you can point to? Either way, stop and assess. Assess what's going on. Take inventory of yourself. Second, don't neglect to give yourself what you need. Take care of yourself, okay? You got to know what you need, and then you got to want to be able to receive it. What is it that you need? Do you need some relaxation? Right? Get a massage if you can afford it. Go do some yoga, okay? Well, yoga's idolatrous. Not if you're not worshiping Buddha while you're doing it. Do it as kind of a body relaxation technique. Do you need some laughter in your life? Go put yourself in places to get some laughter. G.K. Chesterton said, laughter has something in it in common with the ancient winds of faith and inspiration. It unfreezes pride and unwinds secrecy. It makes men forget themselves in the presence of something greater than themselves. See, laughter, it's good for us. God made us to get something positive out of it. Do you need some activity in your life? Do you need a hobby, sport, exercise, something to get that dopamine pumping, something that puts a smile on your face? Do you need some spiritual activity in your life? Remember, one of the times kind of my life changed in terms of how I thought about the Bible was when I realized that reading it wasn't for God, it was for me. I need this, right? So don't neglect yourself. Don't neglect what's going on inside of you. Don't neglect to give yourself what you need. Don't neglect to preach to yourself. This psalm is one of the famous "Oh My Soul" psalms. where the psalm writer actually stops praying and starts talking to himself. Oh, my soul, why are you downcast? Put your hope in God. Begins preaching to himself. And there's actually, this is another series, not doing it here, but there's 5 words that are repeated throughout the Psalms whenever the psalmist says, oh, my soul. And one of them is this word here, hope. Hope. He's preaching the word hope to his own heart. Martin Lloyd-Jones, well-known preacher in the 20th century, said, the main art in the matter of spiritual living is to know how to handle yourself, question yourself, and preach to yourself. Don't neglect to preach to yourself. So first and foremost, steps we can take, don't neglect yourself. Second step, going to sound strange given the first one, find ways to forget yourself. Okay? That's number 2. Find ways to forget yourself. Look, we don't do ourselves any favors by just living in denial or pretending that something, isn't going on that's going on inside of us. We need to live in reality. We need to address it. We need to look at it. We need to do something with it. But we also don't do ourselves any favors when we obsess over ourselves. We need opportunities to be taken out of our constant navel gazing into a bigger story. Give you a real life example of this. Heard this story from a client of mine. There's a woman who, in this guy's town, who extremely wealthy, extremely depressed, holed up in her home, rarely leaves the house, had it for years. Daughter comes and shares the gospel with her at one point. She becomes a Christian, a believer. And, but it's not like she becomes a Christian and then overnight all that she's dealing with depression just go away. Things are starting to change, but one day she prays a prayer. God, what do you want me to do? What do I need to do? And the thought just pops into her head to call her money manager and go, hey, is there like a worthwhile cause nearby that I could give money to, maybe get involved with? Well, her money manager happened to be on the board of this Christian school in this distressed neighborhood. And he said, this school's amazing. And she said, I want to tour it. She leaves the house, she goes tours the school, falls in love. She goes, oh, you guys need, you need a cafeteria, for your students to have lunch every day? I'll buy it. Millions of dollars into the school. But not even the point, though. The point is she was pulled out of this constant obsession with how she was feeling. And I'm not saying that without compassion. I mean, I've been there, right? But from those places, we got to be pulled out into another story where we can begin to forget ourselves and remember and see the beauty of what God has called us to. And she has become so involved in that school, and it has brought life to her. As Tim Keller famously said, the problem with self-esteem, whether it is high or low, is that every single day we are in the courtroom. And that's that kind of always looking at self, and we need something to be able to draw us out of that, to get our heads above the water and be captivated by something even bigger. Find something that sweeps you up. Find something that sweeps you up, that gets you. Even if, look, I don't want to set the bar too high, a couple hours a week. Something that can pull you out of yourself and all, that you're swimming in these emotions, and your eyes can behold out there. And something bigger in what God is doing and how He wants you to be a part of it. Don't disqualify yourself. Get involved. Maybe it's artistic expression. Maybe it's giving. Even Psalm 42. Psalm 42, it's for someone else, for the director of music, it says. And now it's for us. This guy was going through something, penned this artistic expression that became a gift for the kingdom of God. Don't neglect yourself. Find ways to forget yourself. 3, keep pouring out yourself. Keep pouring out yourself. I don't know much about engines, okay, but I know that in Florida, about 6 or 7 months a year, the grass doesn't really grow, so I don't have to mow my yard. And I know that that old gas just sitting in the engine, it can do something to that engine, right? It can impact the performance of that engine. It can get stuck in places and parts that I couldn't name because I don't know anything about what I'm talking about right now. But the metaphor stands that sometimes we get stuff that's in us, we got to get it out. We got to pour it out. We got to dump it out. At the feet of a counselor, we talked about this last night, unburdening yourself to a friend, to a counselor, to a pastor, because it gets stuck in there, okay, and it can almost lead to what we might call like becoming emotionally septic, right? We want to bring it out frontwards also so that it doesn't start coming out sideways. In other expressions of life, places we don't want it to come out, we want to take initiative and go, I got to share this. I got to talk about this, right? In Psalm 42, I mean, it's all over this. So where are we called to pour ourselves out? One of those places is to Him. This psalm may sound like a journal entry to you for a therapist to read, but it is a prayer. My soul thirsts for you. My soul pants for you. I pour out my soul to you. Why have you forgotten me? When we are in what one author called the wintry landscape of unrelieved bleakness, it's time to cry out your most honest prayers that you have. See how honest this prayer is in Psalm 42? He's not trying to control his tongue. He's complaining to God. He's arguing with God. He questions God. The reason this prayer is in here is not just because God is giving us permission to pray like this, but because God is prescribing us to pray like this. Trimper Longman, I first heard make the distinction in the Bible, I think it's so helpful, between groaning and grumbling. Grumbling is us complaining behind God's back, okay? Like the Israelites in the wilderness. It dishonors God. Groaning is complaining to His face, and He invites us to do so. Take whatever you're dealing with, take it to Him. Groan. Groan your heart out to Him. He invites you to. Okay, it's not only something that is going to build your sense of trust in Him, but it is getting some of that stuff out that gets trapped in there. But we also got to keep pouring out ourselves to others. Keep pouring out yourself to others. Let me draw your attention again to the inscription of this psalm. For the director of music, a maskil or a musical composition of the sons of Korah. In other words, the author had a community that would gather around him and sing this song of his sadness. It wasn't just his. He had people who went, we will sing this with you. We will sing this together. It was a community thing. From our places of pain, sadness, numbness, struggles with faith, we have to refuse our pride that often prefers to go it alone. We have to enlist the help of others. So, 2 questions for you as a community. Number 1, do you have the courage to honestly struggle with other people? Do you have the courage to honestly struggle with other people? And number 2, do you have the compassion that invites people to honestly struggle with you? Do you have the compassion that invites people to struggle with you? We need each other in low places. If you're like that today and you haven't yet, call somebody. Tell somebody, hey, I need somebody in the dark place with me. I need somebody in the cave with me. I need somebody to just sit with me and be with me in the thing that I'm struggling with. So keep pouring yourself out to others. God's put those people in your life. So, some steps. Don't neglect yourself. Find ways to forget yourself. Keep pouring out yourself. Here's number 4. Be curious about God's hand. Be curious about God's hand. I'll point out probably the most complicated, confusing part of this psalm. It's verses 7 and 8, where the psalmist says, all your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day the Lord commands his steadfast love, and at night his song is with me. Okay, so which is it? So which is it? Is it that God, your breakers are crashing over me? Or is it that your steadfast love is with me? Which is it? And I think the psalmist would say it is both. It is both. As hard as it is for us to believe when we're in the midst of trials, God is often using those trials. He's sending the breakers over. I know that's icky to think about. It's painful. It's very confusing. We don't fully understand it. And he's doing it to love us. And so this is why part of us has to, when we're dealing with things like this, we have to become curious about God's hand. What's his hand potentially up to? John Ortberg's got this lovely quote. I'll probably butcher it. I won't get it exactly right. But he says, God is not at work to produce the circumstances I want. God is at work in bad circumstances to produce the me he wants. That's what he's up to. We need to be curious about how might he be doing that? When we're feeling hopeless, we got to do what the psalmist did. We got to see God working even if we can't yet see it and understand it. No Christian talk would be, I guess, complete without at least either a Lord of the Rings reference or a Chronicles of Narnia one. I'm going to do the latter, and actually two of them, but here's the first one. Probably my favorite book in the Chronicles of Narnia series is, I think it's the fourth book. It's The Horse and His Boy. And in the book, Shasta, the young boy, runs away from a cruel, fisherman father who had adopted him, but he was just really cruel and abusive. And Shasta runs away with his talking horse, okay? And they end up on all these adventures, but throughout the adventures, there's all these lions that keep showing up in the distance, growling, scaring them, at one point chasing them, at one point nearly attacking them, ending up attacking a friend. Towards the end of the book, Shasta's walking in the forest, and he notices that right next to him is this massive lion. Shasta's never met Aslan. The reader knows who this is. Shasta hasn't met him. It's just this huge lion, and the lion begins to talk to him. Okay? The lion says, tell me about all your troubles. Which, by the way, that's what God says to you. Tell me about all your troubles, my child. Shasta tells him about all his troubles. And he says, there's these lions. These lions have been everywhere. We were chased by them, and then they did this, and then this lion showed up and attacked. And then probably my favorite line in the whole Narnia series, Aslan says, there was only one lion. And then he goes on, I'll read this to you. He says, I was the lion who forced you to join up with your friend. I was the cat who comforted you among the houses of the dead. I was the lion who drove the jackals from you while you slept. I was the lion who gave the horses the new strength of fear for the last mile so that you could reach the king in time. And I was the lion you do not remember, who pushed the boat in which you lay, a child near death, so that it came to shore where a man sat wakeful at midnight to receive you. C.S. Lewis, through a children's story, reminds us all there's only one lion. God's at work. Behind the scenes, even through despair and hopelessness, even when it doesn't look like it, to bring about something beautiful, to bring about true healing, to bring about his good purposes, and to show us that we can trust him, and he is the only one who we must put our ultimate trust in. Like the psalmist, part of the work of hope is trusting this. Well, what if I can't figure out what he's up to? What if I just can't see it? Charles Spurgeon has this answer to that question. God is too good to be unkind, and he is too wise to be mistaken. And when we cannot trace his hand, we must trust his heart. And so that's the sixth thing that we can do, is be confident in God's heart. We need to be curious about his hand. What's he up to? What might he be doing? We need to be confident in his heart. This present moment may be shrouded in mystery. Why is God allowing this? Where is God in this? When will I be through this? Well, here is really where I'm going to sound like a pastor, but I hope that you receive this with the heart of a counselor as well. When what God is doing in the present is a bit foggy, okay, that's when it's really important that we need to look to the future that has already promised us and assured us, and we need to look to the past, which anchored it. What's in your future? Good things. Good things. So good that it makes this part of life, it's going to be the short part. Promises a future all over the scriptures. But even here in Psalm 42, he ends the psalm on a note of hope. Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God. Jürgen Moltmann, Christian theologian, said, hope is remembering the future. It's remembering the future that is promised to you. There will be a day when you will but only live in a state of praise. You know, I'm not saying we won't get to do fun stuff, like and have our pets there, like John was saying, no snakes, but no lament, no tears, no agony, no depressive symptoms, nothing pulling us down. That day is promised to us. You see, in 2,000 years ago, the resurrection wasn't God saying, look what I can do. The resurrection was God saying, look what I will do. It was the anchor, it was the cornerstone of a new building he's building. It was to say, this is what I'm going to do with you. This is what is coming. And you can always know that it's coming in the future by looking back to this moment in the past when it happened in the middle of history. And so that's why we also look back. We look back when we want to be confident in God's heart. We look to his promises, but we also look back. When we're in a low place, we have to look back on the time when God himself came to the lowest place. When it's with tears that we go to him, we got to remember it's with tears that he came to us in our world. His first expression of himself was as a babe. And what do? It was in tears that he came to us. And he prayed these very prayers from the Psalms that we pray for us. And he was a man of sorrows. See, it's why he came, to be with us in the low places, to intermingle his tears with ours. All right, second Chronicles of Narnia reference. Scene in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. When, Magician's Nephew. When Diggory is grieving that his mother is sick and she is dying. And he says to Aslan, please, won't you do something? Won't you do something to help my mother? And he says it through tears. And Lewis writes this. Up until then, the young boy had been looking at the lion's great feet and the huge claws on them. Now, in his despair, he looked up in his face. What he saw surprised him as much as anything in his whole life. For the tawny face was bent down near his own, and wonder of wonders, great shining tears stood in the lion's eyes. They were such big, bright tears compared with Diggory's own that for a moment he felt as if the lion must really be sorrier about his mother than he was himself. When we look back at Jesus and we see the man of sorrows and we see him overwhelmed with grief, we can know that the Spirit he promised to be with us, the Holy Spirit, is the Spirit who brings those tears to meet ours. Only Christianity claims this God who weeps, God who hurts when you hurt, cries when you cry, God who looks at your tears and doesn't minimize them or dismiss them, or shame you, but he shares them. And because he came to the lowest place of all, we can know that as low as any of us may feel, we will not remain there. He will lift us up. He'll meet us first, though. He'll meet us first. Because he came to the low places for us, his love, it is too good to leave us there. He will raise us up. I'll stop there, and we can do some more Q&A.
This happened at the last year's conference. So for the unanswered questions, because you sent so many, thank you, and we run out of time, I'll actually answer them in one of John Stone's famous videos. So I did this last year, and I'm trying to pick the ones that are great. I want to start, though, with one. So we're moving on to questions. So if I didn't answer your question last hour, I'll get to it. How do we find the balance of taking care of ourselves without buying into the modern movement of self-care, I might add soul care, and making ourselves the center of our lives?
How do you balance not neglecting yourself with worshiping yourself? That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I mean, I think you and I would admit that what we see on Instagram when it talks about self-care and soul care is self-obsession. Often,
Yeah,
not
sure.
always, but often.
So I've actually never had a social media account. I don't wear that as a badge of honor necessarily. It's just because I just haven't. I've just kept missing kind of the points in life when it would make sense to sign up and go, no, I don't know. And then I didn't, and so now I don't. Which means I learned about the war between Russia and Ukraine about 6 months after it had started. So there are negative implications. But I would say you probably want to limit your time on social media. Would be one thing that would be helpful. Self-care and not neglecting yourself while also not worshiping yourself. Like, I think that's one of those behaviors that could actually could really sit there in the middle. This is where I think whoever knows you can't do life alone. You need community. God doesn't let us trap him. As soon as one movement of Christianity or otherwise goes, it's all about asceticism, and like completely limiting myself to the point where basically I have no worth anymore. And God in the Bible goes, wrong, right? But then the movement over here that goes, it's all about you. The universe is all about you and your happiness and your benefit and everything. God in the Bible goes, wrong. He's not going to let us trap him into one of those two categories. It's going to be complicated and tension. You are an image bearer of God who is loved. You are not God, right? And the only way for you to navigate that, I think, with any health is in community with people who are talking to you and you're talking with them. If you're just trying to make that decision yourself, it will inevitably end up in one of those two camps. That's my gut.
I think you measure it by asking this couple questions. This is the better answer. In community, you need people to look at you and go, you're self-obsessed, stop. But I think, does your care for yourself serve your significant others, your community in Jesus, or does it serve you? So I'll just say that in a proper sense, I feel that I owe this church exercise. Genuinely. I owe the endorphins to this church. I actually owe that. I don't feel overburdened by that, but I would measure it to say, hey, I need, and I don't even mean that in terms of weight. I just mean, you've called me to serve you, and to serve you, I ought to have a certain amount of care of my body and a certain amount of just thoughtfulness about myself that you need, and Jesus deserves also. That's the way one way to answer it. I struggle with sharing with people my troubles and have found them to be critical and judgmental. Is there a way to discern trusted people? How do you stop them? How can you stop people from making it worse? This is a great and hard question. Good luck, Joe.
Gosh. We do need to discern. I guess, the most obvious way to discern would be if there is any sort of proven track record from the person that they can listen and be there for you. I think also sometimes we need to be better at asking for what we need. For instance, I've said this to you, at times in the past where I said, John, I'm about to share something with you. Here is what I need from you.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like, John's sending me, some 5 minutes of John Mulaney or something that's going to be, well, I can kind of see how he got there, but maybe not exactly what. So ask for, you can say, hey, I want to pour out something I'm dealing with and that's a burden for me and that I'm struggling with and something I have a lot of pain over. I really just need you to be a friend and to sit with me in it. I know that you're going to feel like I would, where you want to kind of like give me something to help it and to fix it. And that'll actually probably lead to me feeling like you didn't listen and you didn't hear me. And so I'm really just asking that you would just nod and say, I'm with you and I hear you. You know what I mean? Just ask for what you need. We gotta train our friends at some level in how to love us. And it's good for them and it's good for us.
So I got to answer this one because it's asked directly to me. I don't think there's anything wrong with soul care or self-care at all. I think in answering whoever asked the other question, that these can become an idol that lets us become excessive about it. And so I had a friend who decided, and it took 3 or 4 months to work through this conversation. We did it in love. We learned to disagree disagreeably, and I think ultimately I persuaded him. He believed that to be an effective pastor, he had to have a whole Monday of silence and wanted to count that as 8 hours of work. And he wasn't off goofing off. I'm not mocking him, but his session and people were pushing back at him that you can't have a Monday every week of silence. And he called it soul care. And I just said, it's introversion, and you're going to have to learn to sort of think about this. And it took us about a 3-month, it was a great conversation. We didn't argue. I'm just using that I see people take this word soul care and they sort of cover up, it can become a selfish thing. He did need some time of silence. He was an extreme introvert leading a much bigger church than this. I got it. But I'm just trying to give you a subtle example of where he used the word soul care to get out of working a day. And I just was like, I don't, and he ultimately, and with some, loving prayer, agreed with that. So that, I'm a little wounded by the word. I certainly do it. But I'm wounded by the word a bit. So forgive me for casting a disparaging word upon it. I really did not mean to do that. It's a good thing. We should care for our souls. We got to ask this twice. How would you recommend someone to a family member who thinks their family member depression is just something that needs to be fixed? Answer that one first, and I'll do the follow-up.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand that one.
I think I know what they're saying. How do you talk? So there's a depressed family member.
Okay. My family member?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm the other family member. I'm like, they just need to fix that. They just need to hurry up and fix that. How would you work with me to go, no, that's more serious?
I mean, I would probably block that person out, is my gut.
We're married.
Oh, we're married.
And
yeah, that didn't work. That didn't work so well.
We're married.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I think the child's depression is real and substantive. You think they just need to get over it. And how do I steward you, the just get over it person, into a better place is the question.
Okay,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And that's incredibly complicated because now we're talking about a relational dynamic between the couple that is its own thing, regardless of what, in this case, the circumstance, hate to call it that, but is the child who is struggling with, depressive symptoms. But in the dynamic between the couple, there's a whole lot more going on about, first of all, I tell couples this all the time, predominantly guys in the who get married. I go, after about year 2, you can't teach anymore. Like, you're not the teacher. Sometimes at first they're like, yeah, that's one of the ways I lead. I just kind of instruct this person graciously, wonderfully. I was like, yeah, give it maybe a couple years. And then after that, you don't get to do that anymore. God's got to do it. You pray for this person. You want to listen to them and understand them, connect with them, be with them, and what they're going for. Of course, when they're asking for, hey, I do want your input and advice on this, first make sure it's not a trap. Then, maybe you could, right? But the relationship isn't what's fostering that relationship isn't going to be one educating the other person, is what I'm saying. So even in that, I think part of the complexity is going, honey, whichever spouse we're talking about here, going, I want to do the best that I can to understand where you're coming from, what your feelings are about our son, our daughter, what your concerns are. I want to listen. I want us to be able to talk through because we're both experiencing a lot of emotions about this person in our family. And the answer isn't going to be the one who gets it finding a way to try and quickly convert the one who doesn't, because that's going to violate another dynamic, which is that marriage connection. So in other words, I don't have an answer to your question. No, I mean, it probably does need to be over time with somebody else working through that. And then the way that one parent is interacting with that child, they're then having to surrender and trust, just like we do every day of our lives, the other impacts on that child's life that are outside of my own control. One of them in this case is the spouse. But the answer isn't seizing control. The answer is still always the surrender as I kind of work to,
Jesus says about a demon, it only comes out through fasting and prayer. So there are demons in the world today. Let's don't go there. But I think one application of that passage is some of these moments only can be worked through when you fast and pray for the person you think doesn't get it and not try to change them. So you have to keep taking it to Christ through fasting and prayer. Somebody asked, how do you get in particular, it's a great question, a grandchild to share their depression with you, or I would just say a friend. I think the simplest way to think about this is it's just an appropriate time when you, especially a grandchild or even this family member, to say, hey, I see you're struggling with being down. I love you, and when you want to talk about it, I'm here. And I think do not do that more than once a month. And I really mean that, I see you're down, I love you, and I want to talk about it when you're ready, I'm here. And you just stay at it, and you pray for them. And that's about as much, you can't. Grandparents are safe in certain ways, they're unsafe in others. Parents are safe in certain ways, they're unsafe in others. Unsafe may be too strong a word, but it's just hard sometimes to get that grandchild to look at their grandmother or granddaddy and go, I just want to tell you about my wicked thoughts I'm having, grandmama. That's just a hard moment for a grandchild. But I just think you open the gate and hope that they walk in. Joe, this is why it's 107 degrees in here. Because those lights are old school, and this heater started blowing air conditioning. This side of the room put on blankets, and that side of the room is sweating because we turned up the heat to help these people. That's why it's 107 degrees, Joe.
Got my question answered.
This heat stopped working. Hey, would you just cut that off now? Couple more. There's a lot of family dynamics questions here. I'll ask it this one. How do you handle an adult child who doesn't recognize they're depressed and has isolated themselves? Same way. You just say, I see it.
I'm here when you're ready.
I think, look, parents, the most effective strategy for you towards your children is, number one, to name them as your biggest idol. And I'm not being sarcastic. Of course, they're your biggest idol. You've never loved anything more. When they handed me Sarah in the hospital, it's an HD forever moment. How could I love someone more? Which means I'm often not the best person to help them. The most effective thing you can do for your children is pray that they will have other people influence them. Pray for other pastors and friendships of Christianity, that friend will say it. You can still do what we said and say, I see you're depressed. If you'd like to talk about it, let's do it. But I think more than that, you just pray that people come in their lives. I think I'm going to do one more hard one because I don't want to do it by video. I think it's helpful. So this is a very common problem. this is the family dynamics, and Joe, I'll let you jump in after, but a spouse is absolutely depressed or an alcoholic or stuck in something. What does the spouse do? So please don't live in isolation with that. Joe has made reference to this over and over, and I make reference to it as your pastor. You need to drag things into the light carefully, slowly, and intentionally with Christian community. So often people suffer as a spouse, both men and women, for years with an alcoholic spouse or a depressed spouse, and they see it. The spouse goes through job after job. They're in bed all day. And there is an appropriate way for a church community in a safe way to come alongside of that spouse and say, let's try to help. And we had a particular woman in Knoxville whose husband would not work, made her work, and she hid this, not blaming her for years. And we finally came along. She asked for help. Some safe women especially, and a few men joined her. They approached the spouse. They worked with the spouse. They tried to get the spouse help. Ultimately, without anyone from the church prompting, she said, I need to move out. She did not say, I need to get a divorce. She said, I don't need to empower this. She moved out, and that was the moment he began to repent. She did not get a lawyer. She just moved out and said, for me to live with you in a covenant means equal response. That took about 18 months. It didn't take 18 days. So there's an appropriate way when your spouse is, and we're not talking about Marissa and my disagreement about how much Netflix I watch. That's not what we're talking about. Although you can join her and come around me and I'll tell you, I love you, I'm going to keep watching Netflix. I'm not talking about the disagreement of particular, I'm talking about deep-seated, drunk every day, passes out drunk every night, never keeps a job, is deceiving that's when you need to actually walk into your church and ask for help. And I promise you, in spite of the fact that the whole internet is covered the way churches betrayed people, we're actually good at this. We have great elders. We have great deacons who can just help empower people to sort of get their balance. I want to add further to this that some of you asked this question, I can't afford counseling, or it's very expensive, or the lines are long. We have resources we can get you to. We regularly, through our Deacons Benevolence Fund, give people money for counseling. We would love to do that. Yes, it is expensive. And the better they are, the more expensive they are. We would love to help you, benevolence, get to a place where you can get that help. So those are two big questions that were almost directed more at me than you.
I'm good
Joe,
with your,
okay.
yeah, I don't know how
I think that's it. No new questions. I have about 7 old questions I'll answer via video. If you've ever gotten one, these are fun. So I'll send it to you next week. Joe, thank you very much.
Very welcome.